This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo, signing off. Here's your relook at the Hot Toys. This is the Alien Ellen Ripley 1/6 scale collectible figure. This highly accurate collectible figure of Ellen Ripley is specially crafted based on the image of Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley in the film. It is the first official 6-scale collectible figure featuring the likeness of Sigourney Weaver. Furthermore, the figure includes a specially tailored costume, a custom flamethrower, a tracking device, Jones the cat in its carrier box, and a diorama figure stand. Before we get a closer look at this figure, yet again, as we've already had a look at her in the past, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall she stands. Those looking at her would probably pinpoint and guess her to be about 12 inches in height. You would be close. You're close. Let me just show you what the accurate number is. She's actually standing 11.6, so that's not that far off. Just a little over 11.5 inches in height. And that in centimeters works out to be 29.5, almost 30 centimeters tall. Let's check out the display stand that comes included with Ripley. I really like this stand a lot. It looks like the interior, obviously, of the Nostromo. There is a few little melted areas, it seems, perhaps from xenomorph blood. But what I like about the stand is it doesn't take up too high of a profile. It's a pretty wide stand, but really when you think about it, it's not that much wider than regular Hot Toys stands. But it's got a lot of detail to it. What I don't like is stands that are super high that then increases the height of the figure, especially if you want to have them about the same height to one another. This pulls off the look of both being really detailed, and it also has, like I said, that very low profile. On the top, you can see the floor grating there, which has some damage noted there on the top there and along the front section here. It's got a nice dry brushing of a lighter gray that sort of has been covered across the surface. What I can describe best is probably saying it's like a blue-based gunmetal gray. It really has a lot of cool details to it. A couple little areas that have been painted in red, a few on the front and one in the back there, but just a really neat looking display. It's also got some hazard alternating colors of yellow and black striped across the front. And also small is the little front placard that tells us this is Ripley. I wish this was in a way a little bit bigger. It's so small, in fact, that you almost even miss it completely, especially when you have the figure on display. I think in a case like this, honestly speaking, just do either without the placard on the front, not even telling us who the character is, and just make this like a generic, not so generic alien stand, or make the placard just a little higher so we know exactly whose stand this belongs to. Other than that, though, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. There's a full turnaround. Again, you get that brushing of that lighter color incorporated in there as well, just to bring out a lot of the cool sculpt that they incorporated into the base itself. Along top that is the adjustable neck, with a cradle to, of course, support the figure when you've got her on display. Normally for this particular figure, I've got her on display along with the Alien's Warrior in a very similar style of stand. I'm probably going to be looking at that one later on down the road as well. But again, I really like these. They don't take up a lot of space, no. They have a lot of detail, yes. And it does the job that it should have, of course, when it's all said and done. You want to have the neck be supportive enough to actually hold the figure in place. And this does pull that off rather successfully as well. Starting with the figure's accessories, time has certainly not been changing this person's opinion on the following accessory that we're going to be having a look at. And that is Jones, or Jonesy, the only, really, when you think about this, surviving member of the Nostromo, suffering such a nightmare that Ripley was smart enough to keep him at home for aliens. But if only Jones was still around, you gotta believe that he's passed on many years ago, to see the nightmare that he thought he had finished dealing with, only then to see what they've done with the likeness of him for this 6-scale release of Ripley. This is a terrible looking Jones. And I felt the exact same way when I first looked at the figure. Time certainly has not changed my opinion. Time, in fact, going back and looking at this figure's accessory again of Jones, I feel just as strong as I did the first time that I talked about him. He has a really bad looking likeness of Jones from the movie. I gotta believe that's not necessarily the sculpt. The fur's pretty good and pulls off what I could imagine to be a decent looking likeness of Jones. I think it's just really the paint that lets it down, if anything else. The paint is way too soft. I mean, there's no contrast of enough colors. There's the lighter and the darker brown, of course, on his stomach and along his chest, for example. There's the underside of the figure so you can see the paws. I mean, it's really painted well, but it doesn't have nearly enough contrast to it. I mean, like, these colors so blend together that it just makes the little tiny cat look so muddy. He doesn't have enough distinct characteristics in paint. And his face, while it potentially could have been a winner, I mean, the paint really just does let it down. Somebody who apparently was in charge of painting eyes for cats missed the memo of what cat eyes actually look like. No, cats don't look like demon creatures sent from hell. That's not the case at all. For some reason, poor Jones, if he had not suffered enough, has to also deal with the fact that he's got these pitch black, oil slicked eyes. I mean, there's nothing dividing the black from anything else around it. I mean, I thought maybe tilting it to the certain areas of the light. I don't know if it's what they're supposed to be pulling off here. If it's the idea that he's in a darker environment so you don't see as much light reflecting off of his eyes, but we still know what eyes look like. And this certainly isn't it. One thing also kind of bothers me a bit about Jones is the fact that while his body isn't so bad, I don't like that his head is facing this way. I mean, I don't expect necessarily that the head should have had its own independent articulation, but the problem is if you put him in his carrier, which we'll talk about in a second, he doesn't look straight forward. Let me just show you what I mean by that. We're going to take the other accessory that goes alongside with Jonesy, and that is futuristic cat carrier. This is, of course, something that Ripley can carry around with him to carry off and get away from the Nostromo and avoid the xenomorph threat. It's a nice detailed piece, primarily in a military green with some additional speckling. Hopefully you can see it there, this nice speckling that they've added to the surface area. It's got some small, subtle details, but the details are so faint that it kind of looks like it's aged, and I really enjoy the design of that. The cat carrier can open up along the top. You just swing this open. Make sure when you are putting it in Ripley's hand, for example, that you do hear that snap so that you don't end up in the process of it, you don't have this swinging out and opening for you. But you just detach it, opening up like that, and that's what the inside looks like. It looks like it's actually cushioned, but instead it's just sculpted plastic. But the point I wanted to make, though, is if you take Jones and you fit him inside the carrier, sure, it looks okay, it fits all right, he seems okay with everything, but he's then facing inward. You would think, if anything, that they would have sculpted it so that Jones was looking outward, because after all, if she is going to be carrying him around on their merry little way to an escape pod, you probably would think that the cat is going to be looking out. It, after all, wants to see what's going on and if it's in immediate danger. But unfortunately, the cat is looking at the wall. Some additional articulation, or heck, they could have included two Jonesies, so that at least one you could have put inside the carrier with the head looking straight forward, maybe in a more sleeping pose, I don't know. But then the other one, maybe they could have actually had the head facing sideways. Again, it's really strange and perplexing why Hot Toys specifically did this. The thing about Jonesy also is it's a little difficult to get back out of the carrier. There we go. Of the things, and I'm really happy with how this figure turned out, but I have to say one of the more disappointing aspects is really, I feel, Jones the cat and the way he was handled. Next thing we'll have a look at is the tracking device, which kind of carries the same consistent trend with a lot of these accessories. They're big and bulky and primitive in design, but that's one thing I really like about them. They're not streamlined, perhaps, like Aliens featured in subsequent sequels afterwards. I mean, the tech in this original film did have a more bulky, practical use to it. Like, you could imagine everything on these would actually really work. Sure, they were probably heavier and more bulkier to carry around with them. I mean, this certainly is a little bit more of a cumbersome piece to carry around if you're tracking things in your immediate surroundings, but still, it's a nice additional piece to come included with the figure. It's got a hose located on the side. You want to be careful of that because it's attached to the bottom section here. And then there's a secondary hose that's attached, or tubing, that's attached from the top of the readout of the tracker. along to the front section right here. It carries over that same military green coloring that we saw with Jones's carrier, although it's not quite the same color if you look at the two. I like that they're not the same color, so at least while they are sharing a similar family of colors, this one actually is a little bit more darker, a little more greener in contrast. You can see all the knobs, the dials, the switches along the top section here. Again, all the things that you would imagine would be practical on a piece like this. Yes, it would be a little bit more harder for Ripley to be carrying this around along with the Jones Cat carrier, along with the Flamethrower that we're going to be looking at in a second, but at least I like the design of it. It's big, it's bulky, it kind of looks like a bit of an amp, like an old guitar amp, but I really like the design of this one, and usually a lot of the times I end up displaying the figure with this, and maybe the Jones carrier on the other hand. Ripley also comes included with her flamethrower or torch from the film. The primary color of this is a very off-colored white. It's been scuffed and added a whole bunch of additional dirt to it. So I like the fact it has a more aged look to it. Can't imagine that this is something that she just recently pulled from the cabinet and it's never been used before. It looks like it has had a lot of wear and tear done to it. It's got an alternating colors of the two different tanks, one in a more crimson red, one more in the white color, and then each one of those are independently attached by hoses that feed to the front of the torch. I like the additional copper color that they added to the front of it, and it does also have a shoulder strap. The strap is adjustable, something of which I have not actually done since owning this figure, because it's not long enough. It probably should have been just a little bit more longer, and while it doesn't give you enough clearance really to pull it full length, I guess the intended purpose is you're really only going to strap it around the one shoulder, and she's going to hold it in her hand like that. You probably won't want to run it completely across both shoulders, as quarters do get a little tight, because simply they have not added nearly enough strapping to, again, hold this over top of the shoulder, or at least have Ripley holding it when she's not actually carrying it around in her hand. It's a bit smaller, but she also comes included with her custom watch. The watch is a two-face watch, so you can see there's one face on the front there, and then one face alternating on the other angle of the watch. A little bit of additional orange on the under area there, and primarily the coloring is a very shiny black. You really can't make out anything else that they've added to it because they haven't added anything else to it. They could have probably added a little bit something to the screen itself. But these are, again, things that are so small. I mean, really, this is going to be fitting around Ripley's wrist. You don't probably going to be spending a whole lot of time dissecting the fact that it doesn't look the most like it's a functional watch, but at least she does come included with it. I'm surprised, actually, knock on wood, that I haven't lost this one yet. Immediately when I first got this figure out of the packaging that first time and reviewed her that first time, I did put the watch immediately onto her wrist because I knew of all the accessories, this one was the most likely to be lost. Other things she comes included with is more so for the upkeep of the figure. She comes included with a pair of replacement pegs. These certainly do come in handy. A lot of times you'll either have really stubborn hands that when you pull them out, the pegs do go along with them, or in some cases, and I've even had this happen to myself, the pegs have actually split. Especially smaller female figures tend to have more thinner, smaller pegs as a result of that. And these sometimes do split. You want to be careful of those. At least they do include extra ones of these. Speaking also of extra things, she does also come with some extra silver buttons. These are actually intended for the side of her white shirt that we'll look at in a second. If any of those happen to pop off, knock on wood, I've never actually had that happen to any of the figures that I've gotten, but you do have a couple of extras to go with. I mean, I don't know how necessarily you would attach these. I gotta imagine they're probably pegged. You may have to, I don't know, glue them back in place or something. But honestly speaking, I've never ever used these, but I like the fact that Hot Toys would include them just in case. Of course, the figure would also be holding squat if she didn't actually have some additional hands. Currently in the sockets right now, I've got a pair of closed fists. Those were the hands, but then you get them out of the packaging. That's the hands that she had currently in her forearms. But she does also have a couple of gripping hands as well. Hands for example, the undercarriage of the torch, for example. She does have a trigger holding hand, for example. So let me go ahead and grab the flamethrower and show you what's going on here. She has this hand here that you can just fit quite easily underneath, there we go, of the handle of the flamethrower. And then she also has this hand right here that can do one of two things, actually. It can either hold it on the front, if you prefer to have her holding it this way. For the longest of time, I actually had the figure displayed with the hand holding underneath the carriage of the flamethrower. And it's a good way to just kind of... It's nice when you get actually hands that look like they're naturally designed for this. Sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as well, you try to make do with the hands that sometimes the companies give you, and the hands really aren't intended for that specific purpose. So they look awkward when you've got them eventually on display. With Ripley here, for example, the hand being cupped the way that it is, again, you can use that for either carrying the Georgie carrier, or again, you can have it just displayed, and it fits perfectly underneath the bottom carriage section here of the flamethrower. And I like the fact that she has hands specifically designed for holding those. Of course, if you're in the market of relaxed hands, she also comes with a pair of those as well. I think when I've changed this figure's look on my shelf a couple of times. She seems to be the one that I like to go back to a lot of times and just kind of change the pose. You ever do that a lot with your 6-scale figures? You go back and maybe change the pose and the way that you've got her displayed with certain accessories. At one point, I actually had displayed her with the tracking device in her hand and the carrier for Jones sort of sitting by her feet. And when that was the case, I had her displayed with one of the relaxed hands. So again, even if your intended plan is to probably display the figure holding accessories, for example, the carrier, the torch, or the tracker, at least I like the fact that they do give you alternate hands. Just a pair of relaxed hands suited for if you want to just have the arms draping straight down. Currently, kind of like the way that she's doing right now. Now looking at the figure and focusing first on her head sculpt, it's a pretty good likeness, I have to admit, to actress Sigourney Weaver, though there are times when I am looking at the figure and I don't feel as much that there's that strong resemblance of Ellen Ripley. There's something that could be off, and I have the hardest of times trying to pinpoint what exactly that is. I'm wondering if it maybe be rooted around the area of the mouth, which might have been also the one thing I mentioned in the initial review. Having her mouth partially opened, while it does give her additional personality, I feel could be what's throwing off the likeness to, like I said, Sigourney Weaver. The face sculpt is good, but like I said, it works in certain angles where, say, this side profile, I feel it has a better, stronger resemblance. Maybe it is her cheek structure. Maybe there's something that's throwing me off. But overall, I'm still happy with the head sculpt. One thing that they went the route of doing, Hot Toys changed their minds, because initially this figure was going to be having rooted hair. If you saw images, early images, you could probably even search her out now. When they first had their Ellen Ripley on display at a couple of different conventions, she had real doll rooted hair. Now that I felt threw the head sculpt off even more. Rooted hair only works for certain characters. Like, for example, I would choose a Gal Gadot with rooted hair. And Ellen Ripley, for example, is a strong example of what I feel would be a figure that works better, I think, with sculpted hair instead. The rooted hair definitely threw off the likeness I felt of the actress. And I think that plastic was the smarter route that they could have gone for this, especially with the fact that with Ellen Ripley, she's got real tight curls. And that doesn't always translate well when you start using real doll hair. That can get awfully fro-like real quick. And unless you're somebody who's skilled at tailoring and, fixing up the hair once you get these figures in your collection, I mean, I'm more content the idea of instead getting her with plastic sculpted hair instead. I mean, it looks better, I feel, on the figure itself, especially when you got these real tight curls happening along the bottom area here. This would just be all over the place if she actually really had rooted hair instead. So overall, I pass for the head sculpt. I mean, again, it's a close enough likeness, I feel, to Ellen Ripley. The sad part about it is it's the only Ellen Ripley that we've gotten. You got to believe by this point in the game, this far along to having this one initially released, Hot Toys would have already released an Ellen Ripley from Aliens, this follow-up successful sequel of the original. The Ellen Ripley, of course, in that film would have had shorter hair, probably to about there, for example. I'm sure if you had the skill set, you could probably customize this one to make it look like Ellen Ripley from Aliens. But I kind of prefer the longer hair myself, but I do ask the question why Hot Toys never released an Aliens Ellen Ripley, because I would have immediately picked her up. The thing about this particular figure as well is, as good the likeness is, and again, I feel sometimes that it's a better likeness than other days. Other days I'll pick up the figure and think, there's something off on the head sculpt. One thing, though, the head sculpt is passable enough that I feel also Hot Toys could have easily released this exact same figure as another follow-up convention exclusive, using the same head sculpt, of course not using the jumpsuit that of course she features in the film, but instead swapping this out for the white astronaut suit that she has at the end of the film. They could have also included the helmet and just made this figure simply a convention exclusive as well, utilizing the exact same things that they already had in their inventory. But that never happened either. As for the figure's costume, though, it's a three-piece layered suit. So underneath you have the olive-colored t-shirt, and then over top of that, the jumpsuit is technically unzippable. You can pull this off if you want to, but I mean, obviously that's going to throw things off, like her shirt underneath, for example. So a lot of times I'll just leave it as is. Well, I don't see why I would want to actually remove this in the first place. Other than maybe if you want to just recreate the scene from the end of the film where, again, she's just got her t-shirt and her undies on. I don't know why you would want to do that, but there's always that. But she does have the olive-colored t-shirt. Then she has over top of that a slightly off-white colored shirt, which isn't necessarily a long-sleeve shirt. You can tell by the indication that the jumpsuit over top has been rolled up. Obviously, the sleeve would be a little lower than that. So it probably stops along the top section right here. I don't know if I'm going to peel this away enough to show you. It's just really tight here that I really don't want to start removing it too much. But you do have some additional markers there underneath. So at least for the fact that Hot Toys would incorporate something that in theory you wouldn't even see anyways. The fact that they'd actually put the little crest on the top of the shirt is certainly a nice touch as well. She has real functioning pockets, which is a surprise for the fact, again, you're not going to have much access to this. And then on the other side, she does also have areas for compartments, like little instruments or pens that she can put. They're actually functioning loops. She doesn't come with accessories, as we've already seen, that actually go in there. But the fact that they do include that as part of something that, again, you're not even going to see is really a nice touch on Hot Toys' part. I'd like to go back actually to the head sculpt here for a second. I know we talked a lot about that in the first place. I don't know if it's necessarily just my figure. If you have picked up the Ellen Ripley for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section if you have the same similar issue. But with this particular figure, I find like her head sculpt never stays in place. The ball socket seems like it's the appropriate size, and it fits inside on top of that ball joint, but a lot of times that head sculpt, especially when I'm rotating the head, for example, is very prone to falling off. It seems to be staying more in place now than what it usually does. Again, I don't know if it's necessarily on just my particular figure, but I do find, like I said, I don't know if it's just the fact maybe the ball joint is too small, and maybe the socket on the underside in the cavity of her head, for example, is slightly too big. But a lot of times, again, I've had this head sculpt fall off, especially when I'm rotating things like her head. If I take her out of the cabinet, for example, and I tilt her the wrong way, I've had a lot of times where the head just falls off. Luckily, it doesn't roll away anywhere, but it certainly is a case where I feel like the head is way too loose when it's actually on the neck itself. Back to Ripley's costume, though. I had to stop for a second and talk about the head sculpt there. On the side, we've got the US CSS Nostromo 180286. That actually on both sides is not necessarily sticker applied. It looks like it's actually been printed to the material of the jumpsuit. She does also have a few little decos done on the top area here. The fact that she does also have not necessarily working zippers, you can't actually open these, but the fact that they do incorporate those little additional pieces of fabric that would be attached to the zippers is a nice touch as well. Of course, we already saw the main zipper that starts from the bottom just past her waist and runs all the way to the top. It's entirely up to you how far up you want that jumpsuit. It can actually go right to the very top, really, if you wanted to. Usually a lot of times when I'm displaying the figure, I'll display it to about there. Just enough that you can kind of see, maybe just even a little bit lower. Just enough, again, that you can see enough of both, not only the green top underneath, but enough of the colored white shirt. I'd like to, again, have it at a certain length, but again, you could bring that higher up if you wanted to. The fact, again, she does have these rolled up sleeves on what is more like a blue-based gray suit. She has a few pockets on the side. None of these, again, are functioning on either side here. And then further down, she actually has real zippers, which is a nice touch, located on the inside of her legs. And you can actually zip those up. You can actually zip those lower down if you wanted to, again. A lot of times, I'll just keep them higher up myself. And then for Ellen Ripley's footwear, she does have her high tops. At one point, these were going to be released as one-to-one real functioning shoes. I would have loved to actually have gotten a pair for myself. They are slightly off-white, only off-white by the sense that they probably were initially full white, but they've just gotten a little bit dirtied on the time that she's been on the Nostromo. I like the fact that they've also sculpted an undersole to the feet as well, and they have put in some decent-looking laces. While they're not necessarily real laces, the fact that they do sculpt them to the point where they look like they could be practical is a nice touch on their part. Again, you've got the red striping along the top just above the sole and a slightly darker black panel line running just below that. Let's look at the figure's articulation. Her head rotates back and forth. As you could probably guess it, though, this is unfortunately the one trade-off by going plastic for hair, is the fact that when you are rotating the head, for example, it causes a little bit more problems when it comes to rotating her head around, for example. It'll really rub against the sides of the collar, so just be careful of that. She does also have a secondary ball joint. It seems at the base of the neck. There we go, the head pops off again. I'll just take it off actually for the time being, as she does have a secondary ball joint just at the base of the neck. What's interesting though is that this is actually encased in a rubber suit, like a rubber overlay. It's not obviously rubber here. It's not a seamless body like we would have gotten with the Wonder Woman. It feels like actually it only goes to about here, as this whole top section feels like it's got still that soft bit of give, the same way the neck works here as well. But she does so essentially she's got a dumbbell ball joint at the top, and then she's got a secondary pair of that just below the neck. Just pop the head back in place and hopefully it's not going to go anywhere. The shoulders hinge outward. I guess in theory you would be able to get them at a point of around a 90-degree angle. It's just really more so to how much give these shoulders have. It's not the fact that the suit itself is too tight. I mean, actually, rather, the suit has a little bit of extra give to it, which I like. But the arms just naturally seem to sit at around a 45-degree angle, just a little less. I guess that would probably be like a 70-degree angle. The arms move forward, the arms move back. She does also have a crunch on the shoulder. This is probably also why they used a rubber suit here, at least the top area of her torso, as this does move forward and back as well. She has a swivel at the bicep. She has a double hinge on the elbow. And then whatever hand you decide to display her with, those hands rotate all the way around, and you can also hinge them back and forth like so. Her waist does swivel back and forth. Again, like this feels, maybe actually the suit goes to about here, because like this bottom section has a little bit of a soft feel to it as well. The legs certainly are all plastic, and they split out to about there. You can go forward and back on the legs, a swivel on the top cut of the thigh, double hinge on the knee, and then she does have articulation also in the feet, a rock back and forth, and up and down motion as well. The figure has held up pretty decently in my collection, but the only thing that's been a victim in all of this, I feel, is just a bit of a looseness in the one knee. This knee isn't so much the issue, but it's unfortunate when you do display your figures, even if you're not crazy on displaying with real radical poses. I would never put Ellen Ripley in some real crazy poses to start off with. Just it seems like naturally standing them in a display cabinet over the period of time, joints become a bit loose. And so far, the only thing that I could check off as starting to be developing loose areas on the figure happens to be on this leg right here, and hopefully it won't increase where it's going to cause problems with the figure standing. She stands perfectly fine as it is, and if you do have any issues with her standing anyways, at least she comes with that, as we already looked at, pretty cool display stand that Hot Toys decided to throw in along with the figure. For me, Ellen Ripley was always one of those wish list characters I would always hope that Hot Toys would eventually tackle. And sure enough, they did, but I was surprised to see that it was of Alien Ellen Ripley and not necessarily the more successful, I feel, Aliens Ellen Ripley, which is really the route initially I would have preferred instead. Aliens was the film that was always on TV, WUTV Buffalo, back growing up in the early days of my childhood, and I was really more aware of Aliens than anything else. It wasn't actually until years later that I watched the first film and loved it to death. But I think now looking back on it, I'm glad that we didn't get Aliens Ellen Ripley. Instead, we got the first film. I mean, that one, of course, is the first film that introduces us to the xenomorph. It's the first film that introduces us to Ellen Ripley, and I think that's a good starting point. They, yes, could have done Aliens Ellen Ripley first and then backtracked and given us Ripley from the first film, but if we are going to just ever going to get one Ripley, and that seems to be the case based on the amount of time that's passed so far, I'm more happier with the idea. I think we ended up getting the 79 Alien Ripley as opposed to the Aliens Ripley. It's not to say that I'm not holding out hope still that we're not going to eventually get the follow-up sequel version of Ripley in a 6-scale format. But again, the fact that it hasn't happened yet, and the amount of time that's passed, you can mark it on your calendar, how much time has elapsed between releases, it's probably a good dead giveaway that we're probably never going to get that figure in a 6-scale form. I don't know, hold out hope. Maybe there is the possibility that may still happen. But I'm really happy with having this one on display. The likeness is good, and it's close enough, I feel, to actress Sigourney Weaver. I'm glad personally as well they ditched the idea of going rooted hair in favor of plastic hair, which divides a lot of times the 6-scale collectors. A lot of them really favor the idea of going as realistic as possible, and realistic as possible also usually entails using real hair, not real human hair, but real doll hair. But I think it's certainly specific to the character. Wonder Woman's Gal Gadot, for example, works better as a 6-scale figure, I feel, with rooted hair. Ellen Ripley, I think, is too busy of a head sculpt, at least with her hair being tight curls, that I don't think it would have worked as well with rooted hair. That's just my personal opinion. But again, it depends on the character. I'm not going to just sign off completely the idea of, yes, this particular character should always have rooted hair, or this all the 6-scale figures, for example, should have rooted hair, all the 6-scale figures shouldn't have rooted hair. Again, it's all specific to the character. The head sculpt is good, and it's close enough to Sigourney Weaver. I mean, I at one point was bothered by the idea that her mouth was slightly more visible, but I think I've warmed up to it. It's overall really a nice looking figure. The one thing that really draws this figure's attention in a bad way is not the sculpt of Sigourney Weaver, it's the sculpt of Jonesy. What a terrible looking cat. I've seen a lot of craft markets where you go to those kind of Michaels or places that sell those miniature little animals, and I've seen better looking cats than what we ended up getting. Jones, I'm sorry, deserved a lot better than what we actually got right here. I've got to believe somewhere underneath all of that horrendous paintwork is there's a decent looking cat that probably has realistic cat looking eyes. Who decides to paint the cat eyes completely pitch black? Something I'll still never figure out. But still a nice looking figure nonetheless. Not so much Jonesy. Sorry, Jones. You're going to have to sit this one out. But overall, a really worth pickup. If you guys haven't added this one to your collection just yet, I would certainly recommend, if you can find it at an affordable price, most definitely add the Ellen Ripley 6-scale figure to your collection. Now, if you did manage to pick up this one already, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of it, or based on this review and this review alone. Today we were going back and revisiting the Hot Toys Alien Ellen Ripley product code MMS366, the 1/6 scale collectible figure. Nice looking piece in my collection. If you guys are also new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and portage your way over to the bell notification. Make sure you turn that on. Certainly that will be your giveaway, your guarantee to some extent that when future videos are coming onto this channel, you won't be missing out. And there's going to be certainly a lot of stuff coming your way. We're going to be looking at some older things in my collection, as well as a lot of newer stuff that's in the stores right now. So lots and lots of stuff coming your way in 2020. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do, and I'll see you guys next time.